future impacts? How do we anticipate and plan for those? So what is the relationship between the built environment and the climate? This relationship is two-way. The built environment affects the climate, but also the climate affects the built environment. How does the built environment affect the climate? Think of the urban heat island, all these skyscrapers, the tarmacs, the roads, the subsidies, everything which we construct. How do they influence the microclimate of the cities? How does that impact in terms of the infrastructure? As we look forward to increase the temperatures and many other things, renewable, as we are constructing the built environment, there are so many opportunities in that area. Waste, we can avoid waste, we can recycle, we can reuse, but also on the government side, in terms of policies and other things, we need to fully develop the waste value chain because it's important. Water use efficiency, this has been mentioned, but in terms of designing, I think we need more green spaces within the cities so that we reduce the urban heat island, we make cities more livable, healthier, and also contribute to climate change mitigation. So this is very important. How does the climate affect the built environment? Research shows that already there are impacts which you can see now, but in the future, there are also going to be more than what we see now in terms of impacts, increased heat waves, frequent disasters, more intense disasters, and many other things. So as we are planning, there are already models on climate change with data which we can infuse when we are doing our designs. Because when we talk of disasters, disasters are of different magnitudes. So if you are designing a structure to be climate resilient, you need climate data to be able to help you to say, okay, a disaster of this magnitude, for example, if it's your floods, your rains, your temperatures, is your roof strong enough? Does your paint withstand 5 floods or cyclones within a year, right? So as you develop, for example, paint, what climate data do you want to input? What sort of experiments do you want to then put into factor so that you come up with a product which can respond to these changes? Yields, temperatures, and rainfall and things like that. Just as an example. So in the built environment, I think we need to design what we call climate resilient infrastructure, which is well planned, well designed, well built, and operated in a way. Operation is very key. Remember when we spoke about energy efficiency, you can design it, it can be there. But when it comes to the operation, it's one key area. But also remember that climate resilient infrastructure, it can just improve the reliability of those infrastructures, but it doesn't take away the rest of the risks. This is why there's climate insurance, weather-related disasters insurance, and hazard-resistant design, which is one very important thing, which I wanted also to contribute for the academia, where we need to do experiential learning, where students can actually cross-change and learn from other areas where they've actually been able to do these things. I'll talk about finance briefly. Maybe I don't know how many minutes I have, but at the international level, we've got financing mechanisms which are there to support both mitigation and adaptation. And more broadly, with the Global Environmental Facility, we've got the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund. They support funding in these areas, and we've got many types of instruments which they use. They can be loans, they can be grants, private funding, blended finance, debt, equity, reimbursable grants, convertible grants, but it's also important to realize that the government, through the national budget, they are also prioritizing climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I'll briefly talk about the local facilities which are available to do some of these things. The Infrastructure Development Bank of Zimbabwe is establishing a climate finance facility which is focusing on infrastructure, and they would be offering, I think, both equity and debt to address these issues. The United Nations, in partnership with Old Mutual and the government of Zimbabwe, are establishing a $45 million facility in Zimbabwe to support climate change mitigation, particularly in renewable energy. We also have the government under the National Renewable Energy Policy. There's what we call the viability gap funding. We also have prescribed the asset status. I'm sure you understand that. There's also a provision for that. Then at the regional level, there's what we call the energy efficient lighting and appliances project in Southern Africa. This is one of the model and case studies which I'll talk about. Then the Green Climate Fund, I've spoken about it. The Global Environmental Facility, I've spoken about it. So I want to give you an example of one of the projects which has been funded in 2021 by the Green Climate Fund. In total, they released about $880 million, right, for that particular project. It is a cooling facility for 9 countries, including 2 countries in Africa, that's Somalia and Kenya. And how this model is structured. This facility aims to provide cooling facilities in these 8 countries, and they provide funding for investments in innovative, climate-friendly technologies for cooling, right? So how they structured that, it's sort of a blended finance mechanism where the Green Climate Fund provided $32 million in form of a grant. Then it also provided $125 million in form of a loan. Then the local financiers, the fund raised about $157 million to add to the total, and there's a guarantee facility of $50 million. So what I'm saying is private sector, the government, and international financing mechanisms, they can come together and create a facility for climate resilient infrastructure, which is climate smart. So this is one example, a classic example, which was funded last year and it's starting this year. Just think of $880 million. And we have the opportunity to do this as Zimbabwe because we have what we call accredited entities in the country, 3 of them, where we can apply for such funding. And there are also models. I'm interested also in energy efficiency. You would see that there's a model called guaranteed energy savings. There's a model called energy performance contracts. I will talk a bit about that as my second case study. There are also performance-based payments, energy as a service, viability gap funding, I've spoken about that, and blended financing. So the program which I spoke about, which is Eastern and Southern Africa, energy efficient lighting and appliances, it started running in 2019 and it's still ongoing. So what they are doing, they're giving market incentives to stimulate uptake of energy efficient lighting and appliances. So how that money is accessed is you work through what we call an energy service company. An energy service company, what it does, it can do a number of things. So this model where we have energy performance contracts, an energy service company can come and install appliances at your facilities or building. For example, if it was Eastgate, they would buy everything, they come there, they install everything, then they ensure that within the month you save from energy efficiency. So the amount of money which you are going to save is equivalent to what they are going to be paid. So over the years, you see that you would recoup the investment of the monies which you are paying to the energy service company, but you are paying monthly. So you are paying for the energy, but also you are paying for the equipment. So over the years, you can then own those facilities within that building. I'll tell you, for example, within Eastgate, you can install equipment which can tell you where you are losing energy, where things are not efficient. As you're sitting in your office remotely, it can show you all those kinds of things. Then after the month, you realize how much you've saved. Partly, you pay for the energy service company, then the other money, I think it's profit, because I think energy is the first fuel. So once you save it, you reduce demand. Once you reduce demand, you avoid the emissions. So this is the link. So ladies and gentlemen, let me quickly stop here because I know that I'll be having another opportunity later to respond to any potential questions or clarifications. I thank you.